Welcome to the original Yearbook podcast, brought to you by your local Midwest Yearbook representative, Jamie Silver, proudly representing Herff Jones Yearbooks. Jamie shares his lifelong passions for yearbook and photography to bring you inspiration, how-tos, and timely reminders to support your publication. Please sit back, enjoy, and remember to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future episodes.
Well, hello everyone. This is Jamie Silver with Herff Jones Yearbooks and Varsity Brands. Welcome to October. At this point, the school year is off to a great start for you, hopefully. And today I hope to share some topics with you that you'll find helpful this time of year. Now, last month, we did some introductions of myself and the Herff Jones team and showing you that we're ready and here to support you. One of those topics was virtual meetings that we can do and I can host, where it's as if we're sitting at school together, but we can do this more often and in between visiting in person, have a virtual meeting. So if that's something you'd like, please let me know and we can set that up anytime. We also looked at a film challenge last month to learn the very basics of photography. Now in this month's episode, we have a couple quick reminders. We're going to look at a couple resources to support you in learning the design tools, eDesign and InDesign. Lastly, we're going to look at some inspiration from award-winning books from all over the U.S. To see some amazing photography as the main focus. Now again, please take advantage of the table of contents below and click on the time code to jump ahead to the topic that is most helpful to you. Now, moving on to reminders. For those of you who've been on Yearbook before, you know that it's October and it's time for finishing up the cover and end sheet designs. Now, for those of you listening as a side note from elementary school on our Key program, you can ignore this part, but for everyone else, this is when we need to finish up the cover and end sheets, as you know, and we got to get that done by Halloween. So if there's anything I can do or our art department can help you, please do let me know and we'll jump in. The other reminder is Yearbook sales. And in the last episode, I introduced you to Jeremy Piper and the amazing team in the Order Center. And we have a ton of tools and complimentary services to help you sell the books and ads. If that's something you're interested in, please do let me know. Now, moving on to the demonstrations for October, we're going to again look at the software. Because in last month's episode, I mentioned that it was really something we didn't need to worry about yet, but now that we're moving forward and we've probably got some designs ready and we want to start learning the tools, what I want to do is share a video with you that shows you how to locate some of the resources that are available. Now, again, we have one video to share with you on eDesign for the majority of you watching, and then some of you using InDesign, I have a separate video to share with you here. So feel free to jump ahead and watch the one that most helps you. Now, to start, we're going to jump into eDesign. I'm going to play this video, and I'll be right back.
The eDesign curriculum is a set of 8 lessons designed to give you and your students a strong understanding of eDesign and familiarize you with many of eDesign's great features. The lessons are designed so you can take a couple of weeks at the beginning of the year to have your staff learn everything they need to know to make their work in eDesign fun and efficient. Ideally, you and your staff would work through the eDesign lessons prior to your rep's visit. This way you have a base of understanding and your rep can answer any questions about eDesign or our other software. To access the curriculum, log in to myhjyearbook.com. Go to the Learn menu and choose eDesign Help. Once eDesign Help opens, you can click the graphic shown here or the link in the sidebar to open the eDesign curriculum. You'll see each of the lessons listed below along with a link to the student guide for each lesson. The student guide is a set of guided notes students can complete as they work through the video tutorials. This helps reinforce their learning and can serve as a graded assignment if you wish. Contact your rep to get a copy of the advisor answer key for the lessons. The lessons cover all of the basic functions that a regular staffer would need to know. There are additional tutorials in eDesign Help that cover advisor and editor functions like book setup and portrait flow. When you open a lesson module, you'll see a video player like this. Each video in the lesson is shown across the bottom. The student should watch a video, complete the guided notes for that video, then switch to eDesign and perform any suggested reinforcement activities before proceeding to the next video. The lessons are relatively short and you should be able to complete 1 or 2 each day, depending on the length of your class period. Completing the eDesign curriculum will get your year off to a great start and will ensure you and your staff know all the great features eDesign has to offer.
Now, as Mark shared there with those samples, it's the basics, it's the foundation, it's just learning the nuts and bolts of the software. It's not the fun part. But if you learn those nuts and bolts, then I can help you, and tech support can help you, and Rudy, we can help you with the more fun questions that you're going to have when you want to take this tool and create the dream that you have for your yearbook pages. So consider this a really good place to start. And again, you guys can do this at home, at school. There's short videos to watch with a short little study guide at the end. Most of them are like 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes long. So it's not overwhelming with the information, but really a great place to start. Now, switching gears to those of you listening who use InDesign, I have a similar video here to share with you on InDesign resources, and this is just an introduction to the curriculum. We have a lot of videos in here, much like eDesign, so please feel to sit back and watch, and I'll be right back.
Hello and welcome to the Introduction to InDesign curriculum. I know you might be tempted to skip this video, but hang in there. It's important to watch this to understand how the curriculum works and what we assume about your setup. The curriculum comprises 5 lessons designed to introduce you to the basics of using InDesign for yearbook production. Posted alongside this video, you'll find a download link to the exercise files. You'll want to download these files in order to follow along with the exercises. They download as a zip file, so extract them and move them to a location that works for your setup. Each lesson has a series of video tutorials that present the content. Each tutorial is around 3 minutes long, so they're pretty easy to get through. Each lesson also has a student guide you download as a PDF from the lesson page. The lesson guide walks you through the lesson and contains questions to answer based on the video content and instructions for practice activities and for completing the sample layout that the curriculum walks you through. The tutorials show up in a player like this, with each tutorial in the lesson listed across the bottom. Here's what we're assuming. We assume you're working with InDesign CS5 or later, and that you have the HJ extensions installed. Most of the information presented in the lessons will apply to earlier versions of InDesign, but the extensions will not be the same for earlier versions. We're also assuming you have the Herff Jones fonts installed. However, the exercise files contains a fonts folder with only the fonts used in this exercise. Having these fonts installed is required to follow along with the lessons verbatim. And that's it. You're now ready to jump into the Introduction to InDesign curriculum.
Excellent. Well, I hope you guys found that helpful to learn the software that you're going to be using to design the pages of the yearbook itself. Again, those are just the foundations. They're just the starting point for the software itself. Please rely on us as much as you'd like. We have an army of people and other resources to help you either learn some more specifics, or just as you go and you have more specific questions, as always, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, Rudy, or the tech support folks, because we are all here to help you. So with that said, we're now going to jump into the presentation on photography, and this includes some samples from student work from all over the United States, and I hope you find it as inspirational as I did to see some great examples of photography. Again, this presentation is all about photo inspiration. What I did is I collected some really well done samples of photography from last year's yearbooks all over the US. So we're going to jump in and share some of those with you. Now again, this is about inspiration. We can then look at tools and techniques at a later time, and I'm happy to share another presentation on that. But this presentation here is not about the camera itself or the settings. This is all about seeing what people have done with their cameras in a really beautiful way. So first we're going to look at a lot of sample yearbooks. And again, these are just from last year, so they're fresh. And what I tried to do is bring the cover in and then a handful of spreads from the book so you could see how their photography was carried through. Now these are beautiful books, and you're going to see some great design and typography and layout, but today I'm just going to highlight the photography aspect of their books, and then we can talk about those other topics again at another time. Now, another place to get some inspiration are your favorite magazines. Maybe a trip to your local Barnes & Noble. Really great location to find some photography. College brochures, for those seniors in the room, they probably have these in their mailboxes, and I'd encourage you to bring them into the yearbook staff because they are beautifully done very often, and they feature some great photography as well. Your local photo studios, great people to get to know, and again, inspiration, see their work, and I'll share a couple examples at the end here. And then your own photography class right there at school. You probably have a teacher here who has a wealth of knowledge and can share some really helpful inspiration with you on photography for the yearbook. So to get started, we're going to look at the sample yearbooks. Again, these are from all over the US. This one is brought to us from Colorado. Now, what I did is I went through these and I tried to, we're going to cover a lot, so I might start talking a little faster to get through them, and you can always rewind and look at any specific books you want to. But what I did is I tried to pull out a few topics of things that I thought were really well done and note them in the upper left corner there with the text. So things to look for as you see these spreads and covers come across your screen here. So the first one in this school, I thought they did a great job of capturing emotion. They had some great close-up images and some beautiful dominant photos. So keep that in mind as you look through these pages here. Again, this one is a beautiful example of a close-up and a dominant photo. I believe this is their end sheet. You can see the page numbers on the right side there. But what a great close-up and dominant photo with some smaller photos, kind of tiled on top of it. Another great dominant photo where you can almost hear these students, you can almost hear their voices coming through this photograph here, and same here. It's really capturing that emotion again. And it's carried through into their athletics as well. Now, this example from California had some really unique cutouts, some fast shutter speed examples, and some pulled color, and you'll see samples of all that. So I think this first one is a great example of a cutout. It's really well done. It's a dominant photo. It covers, a whole spread. You'll notice they did a great job of, laying it out right in the middle so it's balanced, but not losing someone's face in the gutter of the yearbook. And this is probably something they shot kind of in a studio environment, or they did just a really good job cutting it out, but it just looks really sharp. This one has several examples of cutouts. Now, kind of near the bottom of the page, you'll see by the scoreboard and on the right side, some pretty traditional cutouts that they're really well done, and they have text wrapped going around them like the scoreboard on the left there. But I want to draw your attention to the two larger photos at the top, one on the left and one on the right, where they have a piece of the image extending past the traditional, rectangular photo box. And that really draws your eye to that piece of the photo. And I'm going to show you another example here coming up. But I thought that was really well done. On the left with the football player's hand kind of extending past the photograph, and then the flag in the upper photo at the right. Same thing here with the ball. I love that, how we have almost a square photograph and then the ball, extends past that box. I thought that was really well done. And then again, your more traditional cutouts, again with the scoreboard on the bottom left corner on page 54 there, with the scores kind of wrapped around. And then of course the two ladies at the top sitting on that bar, just really well done cutouts. Same thing here. I love this in the portrait section with the students on the bar at the bottom. And you'll notice that I picked this spread in particular because those of you in the room who have done cutouts, it's a lot of work, no matter what tool you use, whether you use Photoshop, our built-in cutout function in eDesign. You just have to zoom in and really get in there with the detail. And the students here, the student laying down with the arm and cutting out in between the arm and the shoulder, the other two students with the hair, and that's often just a lot of work, getting in there and zooming in really close around the hair and cutting out the background with great detail. It's a lot of work, and I thought these were great examples. Now moving on to this school in Virginia, some things that I thought really stood out that I'd like you to look for are varied angles, excellent cutouts, and shallow depth of field. Another side note here, black and white seems to be making a comeback. I love black and white. You probably picked up on that in the last podcast with the film challenge, talking about black and white and maybe even film. But I think this is a really cool cover showing black and white. You're going to see some more examples of that coming up. Again, a great example of the cutout with the horn kind of extending past, the typical photo box. A really cool example of a low angle shot. And for those of you who've met with me and we've talked about photography, I often say the best tool in your camera bag, so to speak, are your feet, and moving around and getting different perspectives. This is a great simple example of the photographer moving around and looking up at these students to give a different perspective. Same here with the cutout. I love it how the arm is extending past with the football from the traditional photo box. And this is a great example of shallow depth of field. So for those of you who are not familiar with depth of field, what that means, and this is a prime example to illustrate, are the two students are sharp in focus, and then everything behind them has that nice soft blur, sometimes referred to as bokeh, and that's a factor of on a more traditional camera with the aperture, but a lot of smartphones can emulate this and kind of fake it a little bit to blur out the background in portrait mode. But I thought this was just a really well done example of shallow depth of field. Now this one comes to us from Nashville, Tennessee. A couple things to look for on this one are really well done close-up details, unique perspectives, and a good example of still life. And there's a couple of those in this presentation to share with you today. This first one is all about the detail, right? So we're zooming in close to the marching band and we're showing the instrument. I think this is a really cool divider. Capturing emotion and that high angle, much like before we saw the low angle looking up at the students. This photograph, the dominant photo, is taken from a higher view, looking down at the players as they hold their trophy, and of course, capturing that emotion on his face. Great image. And this is more of a kind of a first-person perspective, kind of a GoPro perspective. If anyone in the room has a GoPro, this looks like it's mounted to a helmet, so to speak, and it gives another perspective. And this is that still life. I thought this was a very well done, clean still life to highlight an infographic on this page. Now, this is one of my favorite books in this collection here. And this comes to us from New York, and really just because I'm a photographer and I just love their theme here, In Focus. But a couple things to look for in the upper left corner here as you look through these samples. Really awesome background blur, and they did this in post-production, I'm assuming. Fast shutter speeds to stop the action and capturing emotion. So starting off on page 1 of their book here and tying right into their theme and focus, you see how the camera and the student is in focus and everything goes blurry, really to draw your attention to the primary subject. Now this was done in post-production because we kind of have that blur and you can tell that it was probably done in Photoshop or something like that. I just thought it was really well done. You're going to see some more examples. Probably one of my favorite photos of all the books I looked at. I think it's just balanced very well. It's framed well. And again, it draws your attention into the primary subject, which are these two students. And everything else has that nice soft blur. So it provides less distractions, especially when you have text over it like they do here. Blurring out the backdrop really allows you to have that text legible and draws your eye into the primary subject, the two students. Same thing here, carried through to their athletics with the wrestling. And right to their closing at the back of the book. And something as simple as a picture of their school is really, quite unique with that blur that they've added, that effect in Photoshop. Okay, moving on to this one from Spokane, Washington. A couple things to look at are a very creative use of black and white. I mentioned black and white's coming back, and duotones, and some awesome spotlighting. I'm not sure if they did light painting, but if you're interested in that, I would Google that. That's kind of a unique art form, light painting, but I think they used some spotlights and then adjusted in Photoshop, but you'll see that in a second here. But starting right on page 1 here, where they have the duotone. So the duotone is 2 colors. So you have the black and white photo on the left there with the yellow box overlaying it. So you have the 2 colors, and then the color photograph with the yellow over that as well, giving you that duotone look. And they carried that through here with pink. I think it's really well done. And this is where I start looking at the black and white work. Beautiful work they did here. I love the spotlight look. I'm not sure if that's how they did it with a spotlight in a dark room, but that's the end result. And again with that color bar over it, giving that duotone and focusing right on the student's eyes on the the right side with the dominant photo. I just thought it was really, really well done. Here's another example with yellow. Again, beautiful black and white photos with this splash of yellow. And here's just a black and white page, classic black and white photography with some really well done lighting. Now, this school from California, a couple things that I noted I'd like you to look for are, the voice truly comes through these photos, shallow depth of field, and unusual tight cropping of the images. Now, I say that because, generally speaking, the rules state that you don't, cut off people's hands or top of their heads or something like that. But, when rules are made, sometimes they're made to be broken, and I think this school did a great job and very deliberately broke the rules in some areas. Now that's my interpretation of it, and I'm going to show you a couple examples, but right here on page 1, you can hear this girl's voice screaming through this photo. And seeing her hands cropped off like they are here, again, usually you wouldn't do that, but boy, I think it works really well here. It's just a great image, and you're going to see more of this from this school. Again, here we cut off the girl's forehead. And again, normally you wouldn't do that, but I think it's beautiful here. And then you have the other photograph that's more traditionally cropped, where it's not cutting off her head. And you'll see that they have a really nice consistency of this throughout their pages here, where one image is highlighted, in this case the dominant photo, that's a full bleed and cropping the head off, but not the other images on the screen, and page, sorry, and you'll see that here on the next one. Right, where the horns on the helmet there are cropped off a little bit. Again, normally you wouldn't do that, but it draws your attention to that one photograph, and as your eye goes around the rest of the pictures, generally speaking, they're cropped more traditionally. And I think that's a really cool effect, drawing your eye to that dominant photo on the right. Same thing here, right? Cropped right in his hair there on the dominant photo, and then the rest of the photos are more traditional and more casual. It's a great kind of environmental portrait, if you will, of the student in the dominant photo, and we're going to see more examples of that too later. And same thing here, again, cropped really tight, great low angle of the student walking through the dominant photo, and then more traditional crops of the rest of the pictures. Now, moving on to this school in Colorado, and for those of you who attended our yearbook camp locally, you met the yearbook advisor. He came out to teach at our camp, who runs this book here. He does a great job. The students do an amazing job. And a couple things that I noted that I'd like you to kind of draw your attention to and look for. Very creative use of black and white, some unique backgrounds, and some really well done cutouts again. So starting right on the cover here, right, we got the unique cutouts, you got the full cutout of the football player on the right on the front cover, and then on the left, again, having that hand, extend past the traditional photo box it's just a really cool cutout. Now, here's the creative use of black and white that I thought. A traditional page, right, portrait pages, but we have the feature article at the top with the guitar player, and that photo's in black and white, and it really helps it stand out on the page. Everything else is in color. And you're going to see something like that more coming up here again. Now, this is a beautiful use of a dominant black and white photo as a backdrop, and then featured very clean copy. You got the single color and the photos to match it with some cutouts on top of it. I thought that was a beautiful, well done dominant photo with black and white. Same thing here, just good cutouts, right? We look at the player, especially by the quote there, where it's kind of overlaid on top of the rectangular photo. Well done on the cutouts. And again, another beautiful black and white image used as a backdrop, and then having a legible, nice clean background to put the text on top and be able to read it well. Okay, moving on to this book from Arizona, a couple things to look out for while we're looking at these are very creative use of black and white again. Again, more unique cropping and unique club photos at the end. Now, the unique cropping I meant by the front cover here. If there's anyone else in here watching this who uses Instagram like I do, or we're used to the square frames, these aren't perfectly square, but they have a structure to it, and they're almost square, the rectangle, and they're black and white on the cover, and then intermixed with some color graphics, the boxes, and I thought that was really well done. Again, really cool use of black and white. We have the dominant black and white photo that draws your eye in on the left, and then color pictures on the right. And you'll see that they flip this in the book coming up on the next few spreads, and they did a really great job of it. So this one is another black and white dominant photo with color pictures on top. But as we look at this page, this spread, now they've flipped that, right? Now we have color photos, and we're drawing attention to the smaller individual pictures across that line in the middle with black and white photos. And this is that spread with the clubs. I thought it was a kind of a cool way to mix in some quotes, as you see down the right and left side, but also having their portrait of the students in black and white, and then the group pictures in color. So I think they did just a great job of mixing color and black and white to highlight different aspects of their spreads. Now, looking at this school from Virginia, a couple things to look for: faded backgrounds, another great still life example, and fast shutter speeds to freeze action. Now this is that faded background. So rather than doing a traditional cutout where we cut out the background and make it, gone or translucent, they've done a cutout but made the background faded. In essence, doing the same thing, drawing your eye to the primary subject, in this case, the one student in the middle. But I thought that was a really good example of having a cutout faded backdrop. Another good example of a still life. We looked at one earlier with the shoes. I think this is a really well done example of things in motion that they had to use the fast shutter speed to freeze things. And obviously they did these various chunks on a backdrop probably, and then put them together in Photoshop because you got the coffee, the bagel falling, the Parmesan cheese on the pizza, the fries, they're all falling at the same time, and it's well timed. My guess is they did it in little pieces and did a great job of blending them in Photoshop into this one image as a still life. Now this image, some of them on my presentation are a little pixelated, the real thing is not. I thought this was a beautiful image of, again, shallow depth of field and that muted or faded color in the background to highlight your primary subject, in this case the girl swinging and about to hit the ball, right? So the background is blurry, the foreground is blurry, she is sharp in focus, and she is vibrant in color, and everything else is a little faded, again drawing your attention to the player. And this is a great example of just, fast shutter speed. And you'll see in some of my own photos at the end of the presentation, I love photographing water like this student did here, because you get to see something that you normally don't. It happens so quickly that the camera freezes action and we can see the little water droplets. And, it's just a simple water balloon thing, but it looked really, it was a great example of fast shutter speed. Okay, moving on to this book from Colorado. A couple things to look at are shallow depth of field, both indoors and outdoors, and rule of thirds when we talk about framing. So this dominant photo, I think, is just perfect, right? It's if you look at the rule of thirds, it's almost right on, but honestly, I think it's better this way, where he's just off a little bit. His head, I should say, is off in the corner of the frame rather than down a little bit. I think it's framed just beautifully, and the bokeh, right, the shallow depth of field is beautiful, where his face is sharp, his hands in front are blurry, his feet are blurry, and again it draws your attention into the primary subject, his face. Same thing here with the girl in the bubbles. She's in focus, the background is blurry, the bubbles are blurry. Again, it simplifies the photos, takes out distractions, and lets you focus in on the primary subject. And then if you just kind of look around the images on the rest of the page, they did a great job of just fast shutter speed and framing and capturing things in midair. Really well done. Now this one is indoors, and I mentioned shallow depth of field indoors and outdoors. This is a great example of an art room, and it's a room that I love in schools when I come to visit, and it's often a very busy room and there's a lot going on, and this is a great example of the student on the pottery wheel, where she's in focus and the background is blurred out and therefore not distracting from the picture of her. Same thing here, shallow depth of field truly draws your eye into the primary subject. Now, as we move on to this book from New York, and you may have heard of this book, and the advisor here does an amazing job with his students, and they do an amazing job putting this book together. And a couple things that stood out to me, again, purely from a photography perspective. There's other things to look at that are wonderful, but purely from photos. Unique photo composition right here on the cover. Slow shutter speeds, you're going to see an example of, the opposite. And then a really good example of a photo in some challenging low light that we all have to deal with. So starting right off on the cover here, again, kind of like the still life we saw earlier, the students did a great job of blending these photographs, first taking them individually. Some of them are freezing action with the ball, and then compiling them in Photoshop, making them black and white, and making them all kind of look and feel like they go together. I think they did a great job, blending the two. Now here's just a quick example of just getting up close, right? It's not a high-speed activity, but getting in close and you can see the focus on the student's eye. I just thought it was a great photo, dominant photo. Now this one, unlike all the rest of the images where I've talked about fast shutter speed, this is an example of a slower shutter speed. And in doing so with the arc welding here, you get to see this light, or I should say the part of the arc coming off, these little specks of light, because the shutter speed was slow, it gives you this nice blur that creates this arc of light that you get to see that you wouldn't normally see. And this is that great example of tricky lighting, right? For many of us in the room listening, we've probably photographed some events in the theater, and it can be very challenging, right? We can't use flash, and unless you can walk up on stage like a rehearsal or something, and this might be that, I don't know. I thought it was a great example, though, of balanced light. It's not blurry. It's just well done on a theater stage. That can be very, very challenging. Now this one, just a great photo, getting close with a long lens of the marching band on the field. It's just well done. Okay, moving on to this book from Texas. A couple things to note here: fast shutter speeds, casual headshots, and then a photographic combo that you're going to see here in a second. So I mentioned water earlier. You just capture some great emotions with water too, and I think this photo really speaks for itself. Just great photograph with a high-speed shutter. This is that example of, the girls jumping, clearly have a high shutter speed as well to freeze the action, but they also did a really good job of blending the Eiffel Tower with a graphic of the Eiffel Tower. Now again, another example of just fast shutter speed and being in the right place at the right time and probably taking a ton of photos and then just finding just the right one right as that plate, and I don't know if that's ink or whatnot, hits the student's face and getting the smiles, and I thought just was a great example of, freezing action. This is just a simple portrait page, but I thought they did a nice job on the right side with the portraits. They're kind of looking off camera, a little more casual, talking about their class ring. I thought that was just a great example of some casual portraits on the right. Now this one from California, a couple things to look for. Really well done environmental portraits. Again, shallow depth of field and some tight framing examples. So this one, again, tight framing, similar to the other book. In general, one picture is cropped very tightly with the cheerleader there, and then the rest are framed more normally. I thought this example, and of course this is the yearbook page, and it's when they came up to Chicago for JEA, but I thought this was a great example of an environmental portrait, especially the dominant photo of the girl holding the camera. You can tell with that prop in her arms that, the camera, that she's a photographer, and again, nice soft blurry background with the fall colors behind her and looking off camera, not straight at the camera. I thought that was a great example, and then you can see those with the other pictures as well around the page. This dominant photo on the left page is probably my favorite environmental portrait in the presentation. Again, a little bit of a low angle, great balanced lighting, very colorful backdrop behind her, but it's blurry so it's not distracting. Another thing that you'll notice on this and the next example is, as they have these kind of call outs to these students and these stories, they have typically one looking directly at the camera and the others looking off camera, like you see here. Same thing here, right? We have the upper right picture looking at the camera, cropped tightly, and then the other two kind of environmental casual portraits. It's just a really nice balance and consistency that I noticed on their pages here. Okay, well, I hope you found that helpful, looking at some student work from all over the U.S. and implemented in yearbooks that are, winning awards. And the next few slides I want to just breeze through quickly here is on the topic of professional photographers. I'm a professional photographer myself, and I pulled together a few examples just to illustrate some of the things we've talked about, just with some images. And again, looking at black and white and color, framing, and shallow depth of field. So I think, the picture, especially of the dad holding the baby with the background blurry and close, really draws your attention to the primary subject, which is obviously their newborn. So just some examples to share with you. More practical in our world, in school, our graduation photos. And the reason I shared these is to illustrate, in this kind of environment, you really do need a long telephoto lens. And when I shot these at the graduation, I let the principal know I'd be walking all around, and you really have to move around. Again, my example of one of the most important pieces of equipment in your camera bag are your feet, and making sure you get all different perspectives. So for example, looking The picture in the upper left corner, capturing that emotion on the student as he tells, I'm not sure what he's telling this administrator here, but he's telling him a joke or something as he walks up, and then turning around and looking over the shoulder of the student in the middle photo at the top and capturing the principal's reaction as he shakes the graduate's hand as she walks across the stage. The top right corner is looking over the shoulder of the students in choir and looking at the choir director, and then with the parents in the background. The picture on the left, graduate giving a speech, and then the picture in the middle, vertical, where it says lasers, just an example of, again, shallow depth of field and framing such that we have the graduates in the front, in the foreground, sharp, and all the parents in the background as a backdrop, but blurred out. As you can imagine, if everything was in focus, it would be a very distracting photo. But by highlighting one part of the photo, in this case, the students, the graduates with the caps on, and blurring the rest out, it really draws your attention to them. And then skipping over, the last two pictures, one's just Goofy taking selfies, and the other one is highlighting the one student looking back as she was called out during the ceremony, and again, having her sharp in focus, but everything in front of her and in back of her blurry, again, draws your attention to the primary subject, that one student. Same thing here, little kids, but just a few photos to demonstrate, framing, rule of thirds, having one thing sharp in focus and the rest go blurry, again, drawing your attention to helping tell a story. And back to graduation at the high school level. Again, just some examples of, capturing the caps in midair as you see, turning around and getting the dad in the middle picture in the bottom. When you're at an event, whatever the event is, sporting event, graduation, whatnot, there's always the action to cover, right? We want to get the caps going in the air. We want to get the speaker in the middle picture there giving a talk. You want to get the student with kind of the high five in the air to the left there. And you want to get the students talking, but you also want to turn around and see what's happening behind the scenes. And parent is a great example here, and turning around and looking at the parent's reaction to something of what's happening. This is just another example of water. I mentioned I like to shoot things with water because it's a unique look and capturing water in midair with that fast shutter speed. And then the three images at the top are just experimenting with black and white. Those were all shot on black and white film. I've just been experimenting with some old 35mm cameras and just want to share some of those. And this is courtesy of Hinsdale South, some pictures from Yearbook distribution. Again, my goal in sharing these is, one, it's a great staff, and I want to show off these happy students and handing out their yearbooks to the rest of the student body, as we all do watching this. This is the big day for us, right? This is our Super Bowl. But also highlighting the fact that, again, you want to move around and you want to help tell a story. That's what we're doing. At the end of the day, we're all here on Yearbook as photographers. We're trying to tell a story through imagery to complement what's on the pages with writing. So as you look around these pictures here that I've shared on the screen, you'll see that you have various angles. You do have one group shot that I said, okay, everyone look here and smile, but we really don't do that very often. But I did put it up in the upper right corner just to show you an example. A group shot is a group shot, and it's nice to get that. But generally, the other pictures you see here on screen are telling a story, right? We have students in the bottom right handing over the book to the student and the student receiving it, and you can see the expression on his face. In the middle photo, you can see the girl highlighting some pages to the student coming to pick up the book, and the pride in showing off the book that she's worked on so hard. Students signing the book in the bottom left. So again, you want to be able to capture emotion and tell the story through photos. And then just another example of some black and white. I've been playing with, like I said, some old black and white film and old 35mm cameras. And if that's something you're interested in, I'm happy to share some experience and pointers for you. But it's been a fun project, and these are samples from some really old camera equipment. And then back to little kids, again, framing. You'll see, like, for example, the picture in the upper left corner, rule of thirds. If you can picture that tic-tac-toe board, if you just Google rule of thirds, you'll see that she's placed right on it. Same with the teacher, kind of putting her hands over the happy students there. She's in the upper third. And then just capturing emotion and motion and all that. So again, you just want to capture what's happening from different perspectives. So that's a ton of slides to show at you, but I hope you found that helpful. I hope it provides you some inspiration on your own photography. And if there's anything you'd like to talk about regarding photography especially, boy, reach out. I'd love to chat with you because I love this topic. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Yearbook Podcast. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button, and as always, feel free to reach out to Jamie and his team anytime. Jamie can be reached directly at 920-965-6262 or 847-561-8525 or at jesilver@herfjones.com.